It's just been incredible. I call myself a most unlikely runner. And actually, that came from Dave McGillivray when he did a book review. So, yeah, just talking about how I became a runner, and it's a very unlikely journey, to say the least.
Welcome to Justa Runner's podcast. And today, I'm joined by Mary McManus. Otherwise, I don't know, how long ago did you put out your book? She's a very unlikely runner from. Mary, would you like to introduce yourself? Maybe that'd be better.
Oh, sure, Bruce. I'd be happy to. So yes, I have 7 books that are out, and it started with Coming Home, a memoir of healing, hope, and possibility. And before I knew it, I had 7 books, and my latest book is A Most Unlikely Runner: Inspiration from the Heart of a Warrior. And I, in fact, am a most unlikely runner. I live just outside of Boston, and I am going to be 71 years old on Christmas Day. And I was called Easy Out Alper in gym class. I contracted paralytic polio as a child in one of the last polio epidemics. So I was a stranger to athletics, to say the least. And I really just kind of ignored my body going through life. I also had a lot of trauma as a child. So I kind of lugged around my body. But I was great academically. Nobody could compete. I couldn't compete on the athletic field, but nobody could compete with me in a spelling bee, or I was high school valedictorian. And so I became a social worker, and I had a 25-year career as a social worker, 20 of which were at the Department of Veterans Affairs. And what happened was I didn't know good self-care, because having been a polio survivor, basically I was a type A personality, and I just kind of pushed through everything. And finally, in December of 2006, I was finally diagnosed after 10 years of not knowing what was wrong with me. I was diagnosed with post-polio syndrome. Bruce, are you familiar with polio? I don't know if your listeners are familiar.
A little. I've heard of it. I know it's crippling. I remember that they used to have the iron lung and things like that. But a lot of the details, I mean, since I know a lot of people that had back problems or may have had small doses of that, but now that it's really not, I mean, with the vaccines and stuff, it's not as common as it may, it's not as prevalent as it definitely has before.
Absolutely. Yeah. So most people, younger people, don't even know, that much about polio. So basically I was paralyzed from the neck down. And then I regained some movement back on my right side. And then my left side stayed, I was very challenged on the left side, and I was in a long leg brace, and I was on crutches for about a year. And what can happen is that even though one makes a recovery from the initial polio virus, when it comes to later in life, what happens is that symptoms can recur. So I had the limb from polio returned, and I was having symptoms for about 10 years, and nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. And then I finally Googled post-polio syndrome, which I had heard about through my orthopedic surgeon, had another patient with post-polio syndrome. So I found out about post-polio syndrome. I Googled it, and I went to Spalding Rehab, and I was told to prepare to spend the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And that was in December of 2006. I was also told I needed to quit my award-winning career as a VA social worker in order to stop the symptoms where they were. And at that point, I was in a toe-up short leg brace. I was using a cane. I was using a wheelchair at times for mobility. I couldn't do groceries, laundry. I was very dependent. I had a tub chair in my shower. I had to conserve energy. And basically, it was a real wake-up call. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I knew I was at a crossroads in my life. So in February of 2007, I got still and I said, oh my God, literally, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't continue working. They told me, that was just going to make things worse. And I had no idea if I was going to have a future, because they were saying that my swallowing was impaired, my breathing was impaired. I was limping. I initially went through all this evaluation with physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. And, they said, well, we're going to do the best we can. And as I said, you have to conserve energy. And they told me that if I use it, I will lose it, thinking that because there was so much damage from the initial polio virus, that if you use or overuse your muscles and your nerves, they're going to burn out even faster. So I was shocked. Oh my God, what am I going to do? This just is awful what they're telling me. And spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. And I live in a Cape house. So they said you're going to either need to adapt your house or move to a ranch. And it was a very dark time in my life. And in February, it was very dark and cold. And what I did was I got still, and I knew about the mind-body connection, Bruce, because many years ago, I was introduced to the work of Bernie Siegel, who is the father of mind-body medicine. And there's a lot of mind-body luminaries out there. And so I got still and I said, well, I need divine guidance. And what happened was I wrote a poem. And the poem is called Running the Race. And I was at my laptop and this poem just flowed out of me. And I thought, why am I writing a poem about running the race? Why in my mind's eye am I visualizing winning a 10K race? Bruce, I'd never run a day in my life. I mean, one time I kicked the ball in kickball into the outfield because everybody had moved in and they were kind of shocked that I actually kicked it. And so I ran around the bases, but that was the extent of my running. And so what happened was poetry started flowing out of me. And it was like a spigot was turned on in my soul. And in my mind's eye, I saw myself out of my leg brace, dancing in the rain like Gene Kelly. I was free in my body. And I also was writing poems about gratitude and forgiveness, forgiving the people who had abused me. But the most important part of this was this feeling of gratitude that my life is a blessing. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to write poetry. I'm going to become an author. I'm going to be on Oprah. Honest to God, I thought that. This is such an amazing story, right? Right there, in terms of quitting my social work job, taking a leap of faith, and leaving behind a very good salary, leaving behind my healthcare. And I thought, wow, this is a really cool story. And now I'm writing poetry. I started a little business that was called New World Greetings, original poetry for every occasion. So people would tell me about a loved one and I'd celebrate their birthday with a poem. And a lot of people ask me if I studied poetry or where did the poetry come from. And it actually came from my physical therapist growing up, because the physical therapy sessions were excruciating. And she was way ahead of her time. We're talking 1959, 1960. And she was way ahead of her time. And she had me read Dr. Seuss in the waiting room before my painful physical therapy sessions. And then when I went into the room and she was coaxing my muscles and nerves back to health, she actually would have me recite back to her in tandem. Usually I chose the Cat in the Hat, So we would recite in tandem to distract me from the pain of the physical therapy sessions. So that cadence was in my soul. So I just started writing and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I was really scared about leaving my job at the VA, needless to say. And I finally got a nudge from the universe because I had a breast tumor on mammogram. And I said, uh-oh, okay, I better speed up my plan here and get out of the VA before something else happens. So I actually dissolved the breast tumor using visualization. So when I went back for my second mammogram, it was gone. I've done this a lot throughout my healing journey. The power of the mind-body connection is incredibly powerful. And I'm not saying I also use Western medicine, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
I harness the power of the mind-body connection. And so through my writing poetry, I was inspiring my body to heal. So I went through outpatient physical therapy at Spalding. And the amazing thing, Bruce, was that the woman that I worked with, she told me that I was not destined to spend my life in a wheelchair. She said, you've dissociated your mind from your body, and we're gonna get you back on track. She said, I don't know how far this is gonna go, but she took me into the gym and she got me on a bike, and a stationary bike with arms. She started building up my core. She's an earth angel who I stay in touch with all these years later. So I went through outpatient physical therapy. I quit my job and I was writing and visualizing, and I hired a personal trainer who I met through serendipity, through synchronicity. It was just really a blessing. And she was telling me about her in-home personal training business. And I was telling her about New World greeting cards. And I wasn't really thinking about my business. I was thinking, well, I wonder if she can get me any stronger. And so she said, well, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. So we started working together. And the first training session, I couldn't move the next day. I couldn't even pass the initial assessment. And I said, well, what am I doing here? And something inside of me, Bruce, just kept me going. And I worked with her for 6 months. And meanwhile, I'm writing all this poetry and I'm splashing in puddles and I'm imagining myself running free. And after 6 months, I was just about ready to come out of my leg brace, and I'd gotten much stronger. I was able to get up off the couch. I was able to get off of toilet seat, which I wasn't able to do independently. And we'd built up a lot of strength. I discovered muscles I didn't even know existed in the human body. And she asked me after I passed the assessment and we'd reached all my initial goals, what were my next goals? And this was in February of 2008 now. And I said, I want to feel even freer in my body. I want to maybe dance, take a dance class. I want to diversify my routine, et cetera, et cetera. And she had her hand on the doorknob. Her things were, her bags were in her arms. And I said, wait, I have one more goal. And she said, oh, what's that? And I said, I want to run the Boston Marathon next year. And she said, you're going to need a pair of running shoes. She could have told me I was out of my mind. She could have said, you've never run a day in your life. But Bruce, she believed in me. And she believed that she could train me to run a marathon, even though I'd never run a day in my life. And so on April 20th of 2009, after 7 hours and 45 minutes, I, along with my husband and daughter, crossed the finish line of the 2009 Boston Marathon.
That's amazing. There had to be a little bit, that year had to have a lot of good luck in training and hard work on your part, just to, well, for anyone to cross the marathon finish line, but to go from polio, post-polio syndrome to finishing a marathon, that's hard. Not sure what the word I'm looking for is, but yeah, that's pretty amazing that you were able to do that in any time.
Yeah, and I mean, you as a coach know the challenge of training for a marathon under, as a healthy person, and and there I was, just coming out of a leg brace, and
Were
I
these
never.
the leg braces? Were they like back in the 50? I'm trying to think what year you would have been wearing them, but were they like the big steel ones? I'm
Yeah,
thinking
and
I'm thinking
mhm.
Forrest Gump running.
Yeah, no, that's a great image. That's a really great image because initially that was the leg brace that I was in. It was the full um, hip to ankle, um, hip to ankle leg brace with crutches. And so it's amazing you brought up Forrest Gump because when I decided that I wanted to run and that I was having all this feeling about running and feeling free in my body, I rewatched that scene over and over and over again of when he just busts out of the leg brace. The leg brace that I was in after post polio was called a toe up leg brace. So it was short. It was, I forget, I think they call it an AFO or something. And it attached to my shoe. I was back in the polio shoes and the tie shoes. Uh, so, yeah, that's what I was in. And then I went to Marathon Sports and I had this amazing person who I'm still friends with today. And he fitted me. We needed an orthotic in my left shoe, and he, said, "Okay, we're just going to monitor how your training's going, and if you need different shoes or anything like that." So it was pretty epic, and along the road, it was unbelievably challenging, as you can imagine, both mentally as well as physically, and uh, my first 5 mile road race was in the evening. It was the Marathon Sports 5 miler. And it was really, really hard because it was the end of the day and I was still dealing with fatigue and it was hot and humid, which for anybody with a neurological condition can be exceedingly challenging. And so that race, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to finish it. And I was crying and I was sweating and I didn't know where the sweat ended and the tears began. But my husband was with me and the team at Marathon Sports, who knew my story, made sure I was okay out on the course. They made sure that I hydrated. And when I crossed the finish line, because my husband wouldn't let me quit, they sounded the air horn on the field and my daughter had run ahead because there was somebody who was saying, "Oh, I'm not going to be last." So she was like, "I'm going to outrun them," but which is really cute. But basically, that race, even though it was only 5 miles, Bruce, was a real turning point for me where I said, "Okay, I can do this." And I worked through a lot during those 5 miles in terms of images of when I lugged my leg brace and I was taunted and teased, and that was a real turning point. I did the Tufts 10K, I did the Hyannis half. Those were the races leading up to Boston.
When you were training Boston, what was like the longest run? What was your longest training run?
21 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And we trained on the course. I live near the course.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that was really awesome because so we had the opportunity to train on the hills. We had the opportunity to go from, I wouldn't go from the starting line. The closest we ever did was Natick to the finish line, and extra miles with that because I think that was the 17 miler. But yeah, the longest was 21 miles. And that was our last training run. And Bruce, it was minus like 10 degrees with the wind chill
Oh,
that day.
yeah, spring marathons. you can have some tough weather to train in to be outside doing those miles. I know that.
Yeah.
So that was 2009. You ran that.
Yeah.
This. Yeah. That. How old were you at that time?
I was 55.
Yeah, that's a. And I'm assuming you were a charity runner. What charity?
Yes. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we raised $10,535 for Spalding Rehab.
That's great.
Yeah.
That was. I don't know what you need to be a charity runner nowadays. I know it's gone up, but that you've had to be over there. Your name of your book. You said something about Dave McGilvery. Did he help? Come, what happened with that?
Yes. So my book, The Adventures of Runner Girl, 1953. So I wasn't a one-hit wonder, in case anybody's wondering. I was in terms of a marathon, but um, I did go on to run 3 half marathons in Bermuda. It was on my bucket list. I always wanted to run in Bermuda. I love Bermuda. We traveled to there for years. And I knew about Bermuda race weekend. So in 2016, 2017, and 2018, I ran 3 consecutive half marathons there. And my book, the third book in my trilogy, is The Adventures of Runner Girl 1953. And when Dave McGilvery wrote the book review for that, he called me a most unlikely runner, that I stood to his right as he gave the oral command for the mobility impaired runners to start. And I've been very blessed. Dave has really been a champion of mine, and we've been friends through the years. And he's so generous in terms of writing book reviews. He reviewed A Most Unlikely Runner as well. So yeah, so that's my moniker. I'm a most unlikely runner.
Yeah, I've never heard nothing bad about Dave, and he's done so much for the running community and runners, and
Yes.
such a great guy. Uh, so, well, you say you live right by the course? Do you get out a lot and watch the race every year?
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. And then I'll bring you up to date on my most recent book. But the funniest thing is that in, oh gosh, long time ago now, I had reconstructive leg surgery because my leg was bowed from the polio. And after I had twins, I, my leg just literally under the weight of a twin pregnancy, it started to bow. And I was bone on bone in my knee. I was only 39 at the time. And he said, "You're too young to have a total knee replacement." So I had something called a femur osteotomy. So I was on crutches, and I would joke to people and say, "Oh, yeah, no, I don't think I'll run the Boston Marathon this year." Well, always be careful what you put out there. But I watched it on crutches. I watched it through the years. I've been living in Boston since 1971. I came to go to Boston University, and I never left. And I didn't know about running, but if you live in Boston and it's Patriots Day weekend, you know to go to
Yeah.
Heartbreak Hill and you cheer on the runners. But I didn't know anything about this sport at the time. Yeah. And now, of course, we go out every year and watch. And my daughter is planning on running it as a charity runner for Spalding next year. So yeah, but for any of our training runs or whatever, we love going out on Heartbreak Hill. The energy there, especially as we get into fall marathon training, and then when the training cycle starts for Boston, it's just so incredible to be out there. And it's still very trippy for me to think, I'm a part of this community. It's pretty amazing, especially as a septuagenarian now.
Yeah, I'll be entering I don't know what they are when you're 60. I got almost most of a year left, so I'm trying to enjoy my last year in the 50s.
Oh, but a new age group, right? When you hit
Yeah,
60?
that's the exciting part. You get into a new age group, and that's one thing with runners. The birthdays in between don't matter, but when you hit that new age group, that's a biggie, you know.
Yes. Especially for my husband, because my daughter really gets a thrill out of pacing him to be an age group winner, because there aren't that many 70-year-olds that are out there. And speaking of Dave McGillivray, he talks about this all the time in social media, because now that he's 70, he's winning his age group. And he says, "Where are all my 70-year olds?" So yeah, you're right. It's the only sport where you're like, wow, new age group. This is really cool. So yeah.
Yeah, I always thought it was great that the same people are running the same course, whether you're elite or clear in the back of the pack, and everybody in between. Well, you're in the same course as all the elite runners and uh, Meb Kaflenzi and anybody else that's run all these. I can't think of it. It's been a long day. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
uh,
Well,
yeah,
it's interesting you say that, because we got an early start. And because we got an early start, I saw Ryan Hall, I saw Ernst Van Dyke, who was the captain of our team. So all the elite runners ran past us. And there's no other sport. I mean, you can't go and play football on the Patriots field. So it's pretty amazing that, you can be out there. And I got to tell you, the respect that I've received from the running community is really like nothing I've ever known. Growing up, as I said, I was Easy Out Alper, my maiden name, and it was really, it was awful, and having to be part of athletics and whatnot through gym class. But when I got to the sport of running, there was this sense of being embraced, as I mentioned at the Marathon Sports 5 miler. The fact that, they blew the air horn for me as though I'd broken the finisher's tape. And I'm friends with Bill Rogers. I met him in Hyannis in 2009.
that's
Yeah, and he heard my story. He and Frank Shorter, it was just amazing. I mean, it was magical. And Frank Shorter said, "You're going to run Boston. I know you're going to finish." He found me when we'd come in from the Hyannis half, and it was a horrible weather day, and I was dehydrated and felt really crummy. But there was Frank Shorter putting his hands on my arms and looking me dead in the eye and saying, "I have no doubt you're going to finish Boston." And then the next year in Hyannis, I didn't run it, but I had a table there, and with my story and my books, and he signed my bib. He and Bill Rogers signed my bib. Bill Rogers did a book review for A Most Unlikely Runner, and I actually shared the stage with Bill in 2020 before the pandemic shut us down. I spoke at the pre-race pasta dinner, and he
oh
said, "They should really make a documentary about you." And I said, "Wow." He said, "I think I might reach out to Frank about that." And I'm like, "Okay." But that's what the running community is like, Bruce. And it's such an amazing community, and they're there with you, through your triumphs, through your trials, through your tribulations. And so I, in 2021, 2022, I had a big setback in my health and wellness journey. I had an adverse reaction to the second COVID vaccine, and my neurological system went haywire again. And I did the best I could with what I had. And then finally, at the end of 2022, I said, "Wait, I've not come this far to only go this far." And I doubled down in my visualization. I said, I've got to do something. So I switched on my strength training, and I started building myself back up. And in 2023, I did a virtual first run 5K. and my body responded. And it was like, yes, this is fantastic. So after that raise, my daughter, my adult daughter who lives with us, in her infinite wisdom said, you know, Mom, you need to do something epic. You're going to be turning 70 on Christmas Day. And she said, let's do something epic. And I'm like, what do you have in mind? And she said, well, you know, we've been wanting to go to Bermuda, but with the pandemic, we couldn't travel. She said, let's do the Bermuda 10K walk. And I said, well, they have a time limit. And she said, you'll do it. You'll do it. So I got to work training on hills and more hills and more hills. Fortunately, Heartbreak Hill. But Bruce, I got to tell you, the hills in Bermuda make Heartbreak Hill look like a pimple. I mean, the elevation was really brutal. My daughter kept apologizing and saying she actually didn't end up going with us because a friend of hers, a dear college friend, invited her to visit her that weekend. And I said, yeah, you gotta do that. But she had trained with me and she got me pumped up and ready. And so she wasn't with me. She was with me in spirit. And I did contract COVID in December, right before my birthday, right before Christmas. So I think that was part of the reason, but also the elevation just kicked my behind and it was very humid that day. So at 3.06 miles, I had to call it because I knew I was going to get injured or worse. And talk about the running community, my friends in Bermuda. And, you know, when I got back on the field, where the finish line was, they were like, wow, you did fast. I said, no, I got a ride back. I did 3.06 miles and I was cooked. Good for you. You took care of yourself. And as a spoiler alert, I went out on May 4th and did a virtual 10K here because I had to conquer that distance again, Bruce. So my latest book, A Most Unlikely Runner, Inspiration from the Heart of a Warrior. The first part of the book is my poetry and my journey of transformation. And then the second part of the book is my comeback. And so I've been very blessed with how people have responded to that. And as I said, you know, Bill and Dave have done reviews of it. And my readers are just like, wow, this is, you know, pretty amazing. And I feel so incredibly blessed. And I put the epilogue in to, you know, say it doesn't end with the DNF. And that was my first DNF. Actually, my only DNF and my only time in a medical tent was both in Bermuda. In 2017, I finished, but I was sideways and they were worried about me. I was just cramped up, but I finished. I cramped up at mile 12 there. So yeah, I feel so blessed. And I'm actually, my goal race for this year is the Bill Rogers, the 45th running of the Bill Rogers Somerville Jingle Bell Run in December. So I'm going to do that, which is a 5K. And then next year, my daughter actually is studying to become a running coach. And I think I'm going to be her first client / guinea pig. And she wants us to train to get me back to a half marathon again. So that's where I'm planning to go from here.
Well, you're only 71, so I'm sure you have some half marathons left in you. I think that's great that your daughter wants to be a coach, and I'm sure that's no small part from her experiences with you. Mm-hmm. And so when did you put out your latest book?
May of this year. And I put it out in actually May 25th, which was the anniversary of when I took my leap of faith from the VA as a social worker. It was May 25th of 2007 now. Yes, 2007. So that was when I put it out. And then I had a book launch party. And actually on 2 weeks from today, on the 28th, we're having a inspirational talk and book signing at Providence Fit Body Boot Camp. The woman that I partnered with at the back of the pack in Bermuda is from Rhode Island, and her daughter is the event coordinator at this Providence Fit Body Boot Camp. What are the chances, right? So so we're going to have an event there. I'm so grateful to be on your podcast, and I just did another brief podcast with another woman who's doing a show on post polio syndrome, and I just love getting my story out there, and I hope to do a TED Talk one day as well.
For anybody looking for your book, it's on Amazon. Is it on? I'm assuming it's on Amazon and all the other major sites. And
yes.
What was the? And you have your own website with a lot of they could order it from.
Yes, you can certainly reach out to me and get an author copy. My website is https://marymcmanus.com.
And I'll try to remember to put that in then. If anybody's looking, I needed to think for a minute.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, and what's in the future? I mean, sounds like you got a half coming up with your daughter coaching you.
Yes.
So you're still actually getting out running and training. Maybe not for the
yes, yeah. So I do twice a week. I do two miles and do either a tempo run or fartleks and work on my speed for the 5K. And then I do strength training once a week. And then on Saturdays, I do, like last Saturday, I just said, you know what, I need to do a 4-miler. And so I went out and did a 4-miler. And then I usually do 5Ks on Saturdays and challenge myself on the hills. Of course, around where I live, you can't escape hills. So there's always inclines. I'm very blessed with where we live because I've got 2 reservoirs. There's the Route 9 reservoir, and that's got a huge hill leading up from it. And then there's Cleveland Circle Reservoir. Boston comes right through Cleveland Circle. So that one has a hill as well. But oftentimes we'll drive over to Heartbreak Hill. Sometimes we'll go and we'll run along the beach in South Boston. So we mix it up. But yeah, I do. I get out there 3 times a week and I'm running. It's my running, Bruce. And that's something, people say, 18-minute mile, that's running. I said, that's my running. You better believe it. And I tell people, for someone who's supposed to be in a wheelchair, I run pretty damn fast. So I remind people of that. And, that speed and pace is relative. So yeah, I am out there and I love it. And the great thing about COVID, whatever the weather, I'm out there. The only time I will not run is if it's a sheet of ice. But if it's safe, we're out there. And I love it. I just love it.
Yeah, the weather nothing you can do about the weather. You just got to adjust to it. And other than like you said, ice, maybe some thunderstorms, pretty much out there every day. Yeah. As far as your book, did you have a publishing how did you get it published? Was there a lot of interest in it or?
No.
No?
Patrick Lieber and I are soulmates in terms of self-publishing. I actually, Patrick really, he went full tilt with his self-publishing and I really admire him. I loved his book and I loved hearing him on your podcast. That's how I found you. But I debated about whether or not to shop it around. And Patrick said it, and I will echo what Patrick said. I really wanted it to be mine. And if somebody becomes your publisher, you don't really own it. they can change everything, whatever they want. I got to design my own cover. The first self-publishing I did was through CreateSpace, and they were taken over by Kindle Amazon. So it's KDP. So you get a template for a manuscript, and I type everything right in there, and I get to design my own cover. It took me forever to design this cover, and I'm so thrilled with it now, because I have my first medal, my Hyannis Marathon medal, and then my Boston Marathon medal, and I kept it really simple for the cover design. And I edit, proofread. My husband proofreads, and I just I just feel so blessed that it really is, for me, it's a very easy process. I did study public relations at Boston University, so I know a thing or two about marketing. I did have two interns when I first got into this who taught me about social media, because I knew nothing about that. I write a blog. I'm I don't know if I'm going to write any more books, but I definitely love a blog, and that's all on my website. You can get links to that, where I share my musings, I share my triumphs, I share my trials, and go through seasons. And I love writing. So yeah, no, I self-published, and I'm really pleased with the way this book came out in terms of content, in terms of the cover. When you publish through KDP, you don't have to buy any copies, but author copies are so reasonably priced. So I can do author copies, and I can shop it myself, and sell it at events. And then the other thing is, people can buy it direct, and I get a nice royalty from it. So that's how I do it. And I'm an ambassador for the Boston Run Show, and was for the Boston Outdoor Expo. And I do, because the author copies are so inexpensive, I do give them as gifts. Scott Jurek has one of my books, and Michael Seaman, the CEO of Raccoon Media, he also did a review and endorsed it. So I just put it out in the universe, and on social media I put excerpts, and put excerpts in my blog. So yeah, I really enjoy the marketing of it. I know some authors feel that it's a burden, but for me, it's a joy.
Did the writing part of it just come easy, or do you think you're a natural writer, or was it like a slog? Or
I'm a natural writer. It came very easy, and actually, it's from my blog. I journal, and I journaled on my blog, and so that's basically the content of my book, is from having blogged. And I add stuff in, and it's not strictly the blog, it's more, but I wrote it in real time, and yeah, it just flows. And I know Patrick mentioned something about his writing method, that he did so much a day or whatever, but I'm more of when it comes to me, I flow. It sometimes comes to me in meditation. I do morning and evening meditation. That's part of my self-care and my health and wellness routine. And so sometimes a topic will just come to me. And then I have my iPhone, and I put in my notes, and I just say, oh, I want to write about this, or I think this would be interesting. So, yeah.
So, well, that sounds like you had quite the. That's not the word I'm looking for. It does sound like it's an incredible story that you've being able to come back from post polio syndrome. Yeah, I didn't even know that was a thing till I heard about your story. I imagine there's a lot of people out there like that.
There are, and I try to send a message of healing, hope, and possibilities despite all appearances to the contrary, Bruce, and let people know what's possible. And there are a lot of people out there. And one of the women that I did a brief part of her podcast, her mom actually had post-polio syndrome. And I realized how blessed I am, because most people who've experienced post-polio syndrome have ended up in wheelchairs. Jean Baker Miller, who was a brilliant psychologist, I worked with her at Charles River Hospital when I was a psychiatric social worker. She actually died from complications from post-polio syndrome. So I feel extremely blessed. And the fact that I can get out there and be active and, be a part of this amazing community and share my story is just a real gift. So I thank you for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad glad you found me. And September actually kind of our book. It became my book month, I guess, because I've had, counting you, I got 2 other authors on this book. We're doing a book club thing and reviewing a book. So it just worked out that way, and you might be a great inspiration to finish it for this, and hopefully things will. Hopefully you'll reach your 10K goal and your half goal that you have coming up.
Yes.
I did mean to ask. You said your birthday is on Christmas Day.
Uh-huh.
Growing up, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, actually, I grew up in a Jewish family, so it didn't really matter. But
Okay.
now I love it, and I love the fact, I was able to always have my birthday off from school, and also always able to get it off from work. So I think
I
one thing
never.
you've learned in the short time that we've been chatting, Bruce, is that I maintain an attitude of gratitude and positivity. So I just keep focusing on the good stuff.
Yeah. My birthday's in August, so I was always off school, but then I got older and had to work. All right. Well, I do want to thank you for coming on again, and hopefully we'll be in touch sometime. And it's been a joy to get a chance to talk with you.
Thank you so much, Bruce. And I look forward to when the episode comes out, and I'll be putting it on my website and blasting it all over social media.
Well, I appreciate that.
I appreciate you.
All right.